Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I'm Parvez Khan. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Kuhat University of Science and Technology. The subject is Media Laws, Ethics and Literacy. The course code is JMC 351. It's our lecture number 12, which is Privacy and Ethics. So before we start our session for today, we will talk about the objectives, what the objectives for this class are, what the students will be gaining after attending this session. So it is interesting that the students will be able to understand the essential core value of privacy. Secondly, students will understand that words, pictures, and stories can cause harm, and that journalism is not sensationalism, and that intrusion of privacy has consequences. To find out when and in which way media can have access to personal information. So, yes, we'll be focusing on privacy, how important it is to intrude someone's privacy, whether we can or we cannot, in which circumstances can we intrude privacy, or when does the public need to know about the information, or how important it is for individuals to keep certain information to themselves. So we'll be talking about this. It's a very, very important discussion because we see violation of ethics, and mostly it happens because of a lack of understanding that people, individuals, they have certain right to themselves. So it's very important to understand that what privacy is and why is it important. Because mostly journalists they have access to sensitive information which can cause harm to individuals, especially if they're not celebrities. So it's very important to understand that in order to have some information, it's also equally important to safeguard people's reputation and all these things. But first, we talk about privacy. What is privacy? It is basically, in simple words, you can say that it's someone's right to keep their personal matters and relationships secret. This is what Cambridge Dictionary defines it, that privacy is something everyone has a right to privacy. They want some information public, they want some information private. And this is how it happens that we do not want all our information out there to the people, and we can keep certain information to ourselves. To go further in, it's also the ability of an individual or group to seclude themselves or information about themselves and thereby express them selectively. When something is private to a person, it usually means that something is inherently special or sensitive to them. So, this is a very important point that it's not necessary that each and every individual should tell everything about themselves. There are some sensitive issues, there are some special issues which people do not want to share. For example, someone is having some depression or some issue which they do not want to share it with public, it's their right. Similarly, if someone is going through financial crisis and they do not want to share it with public because it may affect the relationship with people in society, it's their right to do that. But sometimes it becomes very important in case of crimes that you intrude privacy. But this is what every individual has a right to privacy, and especially if you are not famous, it's very important that some people want to keep it to themselves. But when you become celebrity, this term becomes very complex. Similarly, it's also about the protections of one innermost self by determining who or what enters our personal life space. It's a very important point, especially for us, that to understand that it's protection of one's innermost self. Sometimes we have a different self. We do not want our inner self to be known to each and everyone. We have special people with whom we who can confide in, but it's not necessary that everything about us should be a public knowledge. And this is how society works, and everyone has the right to do that. And personal space is also very important. We are living in the times where every individual, especially they require their personal space, they require a personal life. Every person has a self to which they can address. So they need personal space for that, and that's what defines privacy. And sometimes we do not want people intruding our privacy. It can be your choice of music, it can be your choice of wearing clothes, it can also be your choice of going to movies or enjoying a different company which you do not want to share with everyone else. And similarly, the ethics of privacy is not focused on decisions that journalists make, but it is centered on the victims' need to control information about themselves. Remember, as a journalist, we must always remember that it's not the decisions that journalists have to make for us, but it's rather the victims or someone who wants to control information about themselves. That's important. It's their information, it's their right. How they want to tell it to you, If they want to share their bit of story, you have every right to publish it. But if they want some things out of the record, it's very important for us to keep it that way. This is what quality journalism is. For example, if you are going to a place where someone has died in a roadside accident and you are just going there to record the mourning scenes of families crying, and they ask you to please respect that we don't want our family members coming on the screen. We want to keep this mourning, the sadness to ourselves. We do not want it public. Well, as a journalist, as an ethical journalist, you should respect that, despite the pressure of bureau chiefs or anyone who are forcing you to go out there and record without their consent. Consent in this case is very important, and especially if a person is not a celebrity. It becomes a different story when it becomes a celebrity issue. If a famous actor has died, there will be a lot of press, there will be a lot of coverage, and you will be forced in competition to give coverage. So that's a different story. But in ordinary cases, people would want to respect that, and they would not want their women coming on screen in our culture. Mainly, sometimes we just go out there and intrude their private spaces. It can be very dangerous as well in particular areas where, especially, you're going where the environment is conservative and you're trying to record female on the camera or the microphone. That can be also very costly. So respecting privacy is also important from individuals perspective, because you're respecting them. At the same time, it protects you as well, because intruding a private space can come at a cost as well. So yes, it's more about the information about themselves than rather than journalists making decision for them. It is more about the victims' need to control information about themselves. We'll be talking about why the need, why is it important to talk about it, why is the need for understanding privacy. So in digital era of networking and cyberspace, establishing an ethics of privacy is especially urgent. It's very important. We have moved from print medium to the broadcast medium, and now we have the social networking sites and a digital space called a cyberspace. It's much more complicated than the past before. Things are immediate, it's happening in speed, it's speedy journalism, it's quick, and things can get viral. So it's even much more urgent to talk about privacy, because usually false information takes place and can be problematic. Recently, we have seen many stories about the exploitations. We share false names, and later on, even if we retract from that, it doesn't. It has done the damage already. And more recently, we saw the pictures of an animal abuse, and we saw that the cat was the cat was damaged in a very brutal way, and there were news about how the rights of animals were violated. But later on, it turned out that no one was involved. It was a false news. It was just something that went viral. The boys had nothing to do with it. So it explains how fast things can be. And then it also depends on the human dignity. For example, a liberal ethics of human dignity for print media or broadcast media, even one that appears able to stand on its own, needs to be expanded into ethics of common good. And the key word here is common good. For example, if you're talking about human dignity, and just like we said, it's about your need to protect your own information about yourself. And more importantly, the ethics is always about common good. For example, it's not just limited to one case. It applies to the whole society, whole country, whole city, and everyone living in it. It depends on how you deal with it, because the ethics is not just about individuals. It's more about the common good. So, thus, privacy must be understood primarily in terms of the general morality, not in terms of professional standards. The term here is general morality. We must have seen it. Sometimes our professional standards may require us to cover an issue, but general morality stops us. So we must go as a journalist. We must follow the morality, because at the end of the day, we must see the high morals set in the society. We must follow it, and it's for the common good. So the two words here, common good and morality, explains the need for privacy, because keeping in view these two terms, you will start respecting others' private spaces. You will start respecting how to deal with others' information about themselves, and that's how the evolution of society towards progress also takes place. Because you think about the common good and morality. So this is important. And let's once again talk about Society of Professional Journalists, who first wrote a code of ethics in 1926 almost like a long time ago. And the code calls on journalists to maintain four key principles, and that's the first one is seek truth and report it, and the second one is minimize harm. This is important. This is where privacy and ethics and all these comes into act. You have to think about how much harm your story is going to cost. Similarly, we need to act independently and be accountable. When you keep these three things in mind, definitely it helps towards the progress of society, helps towards quality journalism. It's about the common good that we're talking about for quite a while now. And let's think about it. And journalists handle a lot of sensitive information, and we have to think about it. That sensitive information in their careers, it's important that what information should be shared, and there should be explicit guidelines in place. This is important because journalists have to make decisions, and these explicit guidelines are very important. So think before you shoot. Every time you take out your cameras, every time you take out your microphone, every time you're about to write something about someone, it's someone's story, but also remember it's someone's life. You may be doing your monthly job or daily job, it might be just another story for you, but remember it's someone's life you're dealing with. It's someone's privacy you're dealing with. It can have consequences for them. Recently, I saw one of the stories and really criticized that news organization. I even called them that they published a story and it became problematic because they published the name of a female victim. They also published the name of her father, that so and so is a father, and he can't be living his life normally after what her daughter did. I found this extremely problematic. And then it was good that some of the seniors in that organization, they discussed it and they talked about it. But it's very important to keep someone's life private. It's very important that it can have consequences, especially in cultures and society which are closely connected. We live in a very closed culture, so if you're going to shoot something, if you're going to write something, always think that we live in a connected society. It may be difficult for them to live after that. It may be very difficult for them to survive after that. So let's talk about privacy once again. It's recognize people's right to privacy. They have a greater right to control information about themselves than do public officials and others who seek power, influence, or attention. It's very important. Recognize people's right to privacy, and they have a greater right to control information about themselves. They are not celebrities, and they have every right to keep the information to themselves. And only an overriding public need can justify intrusion in anyone's privacy. So if the public need is severe, if it's a very critical story, if it's about crime, if it's something it's about disease or something which can cause harm to others, then only in that case you can intrude someone's privacy, but that too in some legal parameters. And then juvenile and victims of sex crimes, we previously discussed this in harm limitation as well, but here as well I'm once again quoting it, that special caution must be taken while naming juveniles and victims of sex crimes. They deserve a chance to live, and sensational reporting can harm the process of rehabilitation. Sensational reporting can damage the process of rehabilitation. It can be very difficult for them to survive. So avoiding that is the best way. Avoid naming young people, avoid because they deserve every chance to live. And then private lives and privacy. So let's talk about this, that when ordinary people draw the attention of journalists, it's because in some way they are associated with high interest issue or something which is associated with crime or something. And then in these situations, many journalists set certain rules to guard against disclosures, and it may unfairly damage personal lives or maybe something that can turn out wrong later on. There was a famous story we were reading about as case studies that once there was a security guard who helped defuse the bomb. He was the hero in a news channel. People were hailing him as a hero. The next day, some investigations forced him to answer questions, and then he was obviously in the frame of suspects. So the channels published news that he's being interviewed, he's being questioned, he's a suspect, and people forgot he was a hero. And he was labeled as a suspect for his entire life. Even if he was proved wrong and it was all false information, he was indeed a hero who helped defuse the bomb and fire the bomb. Later on, but that's what they said, that no matter how much good news you share, one bad news can could cause a big reputation. It can cause damage to your reputation forever. So that person, no matter where he went, people would often ask him, "Are you the same guy associated with bomb?" Something like that, and that would be problematic. So always remember, sometimes the information can turn out wrong, and in that case, unfair damage can ruin a person's life. So a lot of caution needs to be taken place. Similarly, journalists might not publish the name of a suspect until he or she is charged with a crime, and only we should wait for that until the decision is made. But obviously, publishing a name is very tricky, and we always see that there's a slight difference between mulzim and mujrim in Urdu, and we often just make him a mujrim regardless of any evidence. So that can also be problematic. And reporters might take extra care around the personal lives of children and teenagers who are still in the care of their parents and who act with less independence and consciousness than adults. Very much caution is needed in that case, that because since they're dependents, their life can be ruined. But it's a different case study when it comes to celebrity and fame. Once you're a public figure, there are issues that concerns privacy. People are interested to know about your private life. You have little space for that. You have journalists following you. You have people following you, and in internet, in the social media days, it's very hard to have that. And the privacy is very difficult for celebrities. And journalists often intrude in private spaces of celebrities, and celebrities at times also need press to be in news. And journalists in turn can cross boundaries through long lenses, drones, secret recordings from a distance. It depends how far they can take the coverage beyond their limitations. And obviously, this has given birth to paparazzi and tabloid journalism, the sensational journalism, gossips, all these types of things that are associated with celebrities and stars. And this is what has changed the shape of journalism. That's why the tabloid journalism, paparazzi journalism is a lot popular, because they intrude in the privacy of celebrities. Now let's take some examples that recently we've seen that an actor committed suicide. It's very important to look at the media coverage and the conspiracy theories that have intensified during this death. Sushant Singh, who was reportedly who killed himself. After that, we've seen that he's in the news every now and then. We are seeing some coverages regarding that, news coming up, people associated with conspiracy theories. But in all that light, how the press is giving coverage to their families, is there any private space? Are they intruding their privacy? I think it's going to be a very interesting case to look at too, because it's a recent one. It's the most popular one on social media site, because a popular actor killed himself, and how their families have come into limelight. It's a very important thing. How the actors have come into the limelight who have been associated with him. It's a very interesting story to look into. And then also a Pakistani actress and the social media star Kandil Baloch was immediately killed after her real name and whereabouts of a family were publicly shared on news organization. The news organization shared where she lives, who her family is, what her real name is, and that created a very serious consequence for her. Do you think that the press is responsible for provoking her death? Do you think press is responsible for bringing her in comparison and debate programs with the religious scholars, and just for the purpose of rating, things were escalated. But in the end, it costed her life. She was killed for that. And so the media role is very important to look into this perspective as well. And whenever we talk about ethics, privacy, and harm limitation principle, I always talk about the word empathy. We have to walk in their shoes to understand them. We have to place ourselves that what if this is us? What if we are mourning or just upset and someone comes and intrude our private spaces? How we would react to that? This is what journalists need to keep in mind, that if you are in pain, if you are in trouble, would you like someone intruding your private space? How problematic can that be? Do you need to respect others when they are in pain, trouble, or want to keep certain information about themselves or their children? What if people want to hide their identity, because that can be problematic for them, because they need rehabilitation and growing up as well. So this is very important. Empathy is the key. Walk in their shoes to understand them is the only way we can improve our ethical standards. That's the only way. We have to think about it, that what if this was me? How would I have reacted? And this helps quality journalism. Now turning towards questions, how important it is to respect privacy. Is it a moral decision or is it a professional decision? How do you look at it? Do you think that we have to look into it from moral perspective? We have to pace ourselves in terms of empathy and decide, or do we have to follow it from professional guidelines or how our seniors tell us to cover? And what are the latest stories you think were where ethics were violated, where privacy was just tarnished, and it was problematic? It caused a lot of difficulties for the people who were in there. And if you were a journalist, how would have you covered a particular news stories where privacy was intruded? So these are some of the very important questions that we always have to think about intruding a private space for anyone. It's their decision what information people want to share with the press. It's not our decision. We have to respect privacy, particularly if it's not a celebrity. And we have to keep in mind the public need for information and balance it out with our needs and their needs. And importantly, it's about how and what information people want to keep it to themselves. The respect of private space is essential. It's the key for a journalist, and modern ethical practices wants us to respect that. If someone asks us to keep information off the record, we have to keep it off the record. We have to respect that. That's a very, very important element of quality journalism that we have to keep in mind. And these are some of the references that we've used. And I hope that the session was pretty interesting. We'll be in touch, and hopefully, our next session will discuss much more about ethics. So these are the questions, and you can think about some case studies, some examples, some questions that will further refine your opinion on the ethical standards and the right to privacy. Thank you very much.